The global Sukuk market really kicked off in the first half of 2017 and has created a global widespread appeal for investors. According to S&P Global Market intelligence, African governments need to address a number of legal hurdles to issuing Sukuk. But the question remains, are Sukuks a good fit for Africa? Samira Mensah, an associate director in Standard & Poor's, joined me to highlight this. Now, the question today is, are Sukuks a good fit for Africa? I'm just going to start off by asking you to explain how the Sukuk works, and then we can actually begin to break down the difficulties, or complexities with it.
Yes, I do believe that they are a good fit. They are a good fit simply because they tend to require tangible assets. And when you see the African continent and many African countries do require infrastructure developments and financing, you can imagine that it's a good fit in terms of matching these tangible assets with increased financing needs. And so in that way, we think that a good way to attract additional or alternative liquidity pools is to use the tangible assets and at the same time develop the infrastructure needs that are quite rising on the continent.
Yeah. Now, what's unique about the Sukuk?
What's unique, they tend to be actually called Islamic bonds, but it's definitely not akin as a bond. When you look at the structuring of the Sukuk, these are structured products, similar to asset-backed securities. The only thing is that most of them tend to be structured in the way that they reproduce the fixed income characteristic of a bond, in the way that they serve fixed income revenues to investors, but at the same time some other structure could actually incorporate some residual asset risk. So we have to be careful in the way we or issuers tend to present these instruments to the market. And as a rating agency, S&P Global developed a methodology to cater for the rating of this instrument, taking care and focusing particularly on the financial obligations of the sponsor vis-à-vis the issuer, which is the special purpose vehicle that is the legal issuer of these instruments.
Now, a report by S&P, the global credit portal, on their global credit portal, did say that, while the Sukuk has received widespread appeal from investors, only a few African countries will tap into the Sukuk market over the next 12 to 18 months. They're saying owing to the fact that issuing this Islamic financial instrument is not a simple matter. What makes it complex, if it is complex?
It is complex. The first point that I alluded to is the structured nature of these instruments. These are not simple bonds or the conventional bonds that we see in the market, although they tend to reproduce the same characteristic for most of them. But the other aspect that presents complexity is around actually recognizing the Islamic contracts in the legal framework. From a regulatory standpoint, but also from a tax standpoint. And so not all countries can just say, let's issue Sukuk if they haven't catered for these, regulatory and legal framework. So that's one thing. And then the other aspect is around standardization or the lack thereof, around, the type of structure that are used to issue Sukuk, and also the way Islamic contracts underneath these structures are interpreted across jurisdictions. And so these are the complexities around issuing Sukuk.
Now, do you think Africa's infrastructure, development presents some kind of fertile environment for the Sukuk issuance?
Absolutely, because the infrastructure gap is huge on the continent, and the financing needs are also very important. And at the same time, we have seen, generally speaking, fiscal deficits gap widens on the back of lower commodity prices. So there is definitely a gap between what needs to be done in order to foster economic development and create wealth for the populations, and at the same time finding the financing to cater for those needs. And the financing can be found not only in the domestic markets, as we have seen with the Nigerian first Sukuk issuance, but also can be found abroad by issuing foreign currency Sukuk, and that's a way of tapping into existing liquidity pools outside of the main country.
Now, Africa's narrative when it comes to infrastructure development has remained the same, for decades now. Do you think, when it comes to financing infrastructure, do you think the Sukuk bond, gives that one solution or that one final solution to financing infrastructure in Africa?
It's one way of financing infrastructure developments. We've seen that, more developed economies haven't financed through Sukuk. But what Sukuk can do for African countries is, first of all, leverage their existing tangible assets, existing roads that need further development. So leverage these existing tangible assets, find investors outside their natural borders, and also perhaps cater for ethically sensitive investors. So in that sense, Sukuk can probably increase or enhance chances to foster these infrastructure developments.
Now, do you foresee challenges here, that might make most African leaders want to shy away from it? Going back to that report by S&P, it does say among the challenges you have a lack of a clear legal and tax regimes to support a thriving Sukuk market. So just like I asked earlier, if we have, the fertile environment for the Sukuk issuance, what do you make of these challenges?
Yes, challenges exist everywhere when it comes to issuing Sukuk and making sure that they are understood from an investor standpoint, but also from the broader collectivity, I would say. So the challenges that we talked about in the report, and we have talked about them in the past, is the need for these legal framework recognizing what an Islamic contract is, and there are several of them that underpin Sukuk structures. So it's important that it's recognized in the legislation. And at the same time, it's also important that investors are treated, investors who invest in Sukuk are treated equally, whether they invest in Sukuk or they invest in conventional bonds. And Nigeria, like other countries who have issued Sukuk, like South Africa or Senegal for that matter, have recognized that particular need and treat equally and have exempted actually investors from tax when it comes to Sukuk. So it's quite important to do that. And the other aspects that is equally important is really to address the problem of Sharia interpretation, because the market is very sensitive to that aspect. And we have seen in recent times and just earlier this year, global regulatory setting bodies when it comes to the Islamic finance industry proposing actually to establish central Sharia boards, as we have the case in Malaysia, that tend to avoid actually this discrepancy between one institution or one Sharia scholar saying, that instrument is Sharia compliant and the other one is not. And what Nigeria has done is that it has established at the CBN level a central Sharia body, Sharia board, to cater for that need. So that one negative aspects or factor that can be easily avoided. And perhaps on the legal structure of these Sukuk, the other thing that needs to be done, in our opinion, would be to sort of systematically say, for liability type Sukuk, let's use X, Y, and Z type of structure, and for equity-like structure, let's use X, Y, and Z type of Islamic contract to recognize the fact that potentially investor could be exposed to residual asset risk. So it's quite important to really recognize and present to the investor community what Sukuk are and what risks they can encounter.
I agree with you on that, Samira. I mean, at the bottom of it all is a proper understanding of what the Sukuk is about from the point of view of the investors, from the government itself. A clear understanding really has to be there. Now, this conversation about the Sukuk has been on for a while now. How much do you think many have actually grappled, actually come to understand really what the Sukuk is about? Do you think the enlightenment is out there? Do you think the awareness is out there for people to really understand what the Sukuk is?
Yes, no, it's quite obvious that the fact that investors tend to refer to Sukuk as Islamic bonds is already an indication that there is a lack of understanding sometimes from part of the investor community to understand that.
Yeah, but Samira, I mean, from the very beginning, I mean, that's the term you have there. I mean, I think I heard about Islamic, bond before I even heard about the word Sukuk. So even the media had put it out there from the very beginning. So how much do you think it can begin to change that perception now?
It does take quite a lot of effort from regulatory bodies, global setting bodies, but also local regulators to better understand and campaign around those particular notions, and also education, at university level, to promote in a way the differences between Sukuk and conventional bonds.
And that was Samira Mensah, an Associate Director in Standard & Poor's.